Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and another video on the Rusty T4. This is going to be a long one, but I'm going to go into the full sort of process on how I've managed to repair the sliding door step and also the runner that it sits on. So stay tuned. So just a quick clip to show how the sliding door step and the runner section currently looks. You can see it's going in a few places. It's actually holed on this sort of lip panel down here, and the rot sort of spreads right across that step. The step itself is actually quite dented. It's a bit sort of misshapen and a bit weak, and where it sort of meets this floor section up top, the rot is spreading as well, so this is going to need addressed. But certainly the worst part of the step overall is in this corner where it meets the rear trailing arm mount. You can see it's completely holed in that lower section as well. So we're going to start hacking into this and we're going to start to repair it piece by piece. So the plan really, I think, as you can see that I've started already, is to get this step off. Ideally, I'm trying to get it off in one piece-ish. So I've marked this line where I'm going to make a cut right along, and then I'm trying to get all the spot welds out. So hopefully I can just lift this step off in one. These spot welds they're not the easiest to see actually, but they seem to follow a pattern of sort of 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And if I just grab my little pry bar thing here, don't know if you can see that, but it is slowly starting to come away from the runner underneath. Right, I've drilled out God knows how many spot welds, heaps of them right along here. There was a few in here, a couple up there, quite a few in here. There's a little panel underneath that sits in there, and then I've just zipped right along with the grinder. And much to my delight, the step is off. To reveal this. So obviously I've cut the full step out. I'm just sitting up there. I've decided I'm not going to use that again because it's too far gone. There's no point reusing that. So my plan is to just leave this corner for now. It's holding the runner in place where it needs to be, and I'll focus on repairing this corner here. So at least at that point the runner will be sitting where it needs to be, and it'll be nice and strong where it's went a bit weaker here. And I can offer up the sliding door to see if it closes and shuts fine. If it does, then I'll start to build out on top of this. But the main aim is just to have this runner sitting exactly where it needs to be. So obviously, as you can see, I've cut out most of the rot on this boxy part here, and it's full of crap as well, just like that other corner was. So I'm going to hoover all that out and get in here with the finger sander, try to clean this up as best I can. It looks like it's going just in that edge bit there, so maybe from underneath the van I'll come up in behind and repair this bit if it's too bad. I've started cleaning up this bit here. It seems pretty decent to sort of this bit here. So I think my plan would be to sort of cut this rotten bit out here, clean this runner up as best I can. It looks like it might be okay to weld to. And I'll try to get a plate in here I'll get into here with a finger sander and stuff, clean this back the best I can, and I'll just have to weld the plate that I put in here. I'm just gonna have to try and weld it in to the suspension arm mount bit at the back here, and yeah, just try to basically close off this whole section. So cleaned back most of what I could. It's pretty good inside this box bit. It still had a lot of the original paint and stuff, so just going to hoover that out and epoxy prime it. But before I do that, I have cleaned out the rear suspension arm mounting point, cleaned back some of these little bitties in here, and I've cut out a plate from the old front cross member that was rotten, but it does still have some decent metal on it, and the good thing is it's nice and thick. I think that's about 3mm. Anyway, I've got this plate which is going to go something like that, and that's going to weld to the runner here, because just now the runner has a bit of movement because it's so weak, because it's only been held in here. So to sort of fix the runner into where it needs to be, I'm going to quickly zap this plate in, and that'll at least keep this runner exactly where it needs to be for the sliding door. And then the plan after that is to cut out maybe from around here, just before this hole anyway, because that is I believe that's for mounting the stop bracket thing that sort of holds the door back. So I'm going to cut just about here, and I'm only going to cut this piece here off, and I'm going to clean up what's in behind, and I'm going to try and make a piece that basically, you know, sort of bridges this gap here. Right, quick update on state of play. So I've welded in that piece here that I mentioned, tied that into the suspension mount. I've also just went ahead and I've cut off the end section of that runner, and it's actually pretty rotten as well, so I'm gonna probably have to have a go at making another one of these. And I'm assuming all these sort of, this little circly bit and stuff is all there for a reason, so I'm going to try and make an exact copy of that. Anyway, that sort of just sat in there. I've also went ahead and I've cut out all the rock that was in this bit here, and I've just made up a couple of pieces to tie into this top section of the runner, because it was quite nice thick strong metal, so I've extended that and welded that up to the end. I've then made a sort of L-shaped piece here, and then I've added in another piece along the bottom which forms the lip to which this outer panel will get spot welded to, and that ties into the remainder of the sill. And I've just closed off the corner here and totally cleaned up the sort of B-pillar bit in behind there. I now just need to make a decision about what I'm wanting to do with this whole section here, because as I was cleaning this bit back, I realised it has actually got a few pinholes. You can see one there, and if I take this light underneath, you can see light coming through in a couple of spots, so it's definitely weak. It's hard to say because it feels nice and solid across the middle, so I'm in two minds whether to just sort of patch up the weak spots. There's a couple of pinholes here as well, so this curved section will definitely need doing. My other option is that I just cut up some, I've basically got this box section. I've got this spare box section, and I was thinking to zip it right across here and then the same on the opposite corner. So that would give me essentially two pieces of angle iron, like L-shaped angle iron, and I could sort of cut slits into one and just bend it to to give me this curved edge here. Now if I do go down that route of replacing the whole sort of bottom section of the track, I think I do risk that the runner itself is going to sort of move out of position, or it might, you know, flex a little bit and move out of where it's currently sitting. So what I might do is just tack in some temporary bracing from here to here, here to here, here to here, and that should just hold the runner exactly where it is while I sort of make some cuts and whatnot down there. Now the other thing I'm going to have to think about for that is this height here, from the bottom of this lip to the top of this runner here, because as you can see where the two are spot welded together, there's maybe like a 5mm gap or so just in this bottom bit here, and I'm sure that's important. Obviously the runner needs to be the correct height. All right, so I've braced the runner in place. So just welded in a couple of bits of box section. Luckily that chassis leg is looking really good actually, once I cleaned that back. So just a couple of braces there. So that's nice and strong now. You know, I can stand on this. It's going to take my weight and hopefully not move at all. So, and obviously having this corner finished is helping sort of fix it all in place now as well. Now I've also been cleaning up the backside here. And to be fair to VW, they put a hell of a lot of this stuff. The thick sort of buttery underseal stuff. I was under here for about half an hour straight, just grinding away with a knot wheel. I've managed to get most of it back now, but it's also revealed a few bad spots. I'll just get the light in place. So you see this bit, I already knew this bit was going, but obviously when you take the wire wheel to it, it just gets a bit worse. There's a pinhole just here as well on the sort of sill lip section. And luckily, the top section where the runner is actually spot welded to, that you can see right along, it's really nice and solid. So I think my rough plan is to cut basically right along this edge, all the way along, and then essentially replace from here to here, right the way along. So this was my box section that I basically just split it in half lengthways. So that gives me two decent lengths of pretty thick stuff. It's 3mm thick, so 3mm thick. So essentially this will become the runner. So it'll be nice and strong. Take the weight of the door quite nicely. Yeah, essentially what I'm looking to do here is put this pretty much in there, and this is actually a pretty good length, just to where it curves off there. Right, I've made the initial cut in the back there. So here's the old piece. And the reason I've decided to do this in sort of 3 stages, so first stage, and then the middle one, and then this one. The reason I'm doing this middle one separately is because I've got 2 reference points, here and here, to where the runner needs to sit exactly. So if I can get a magnet or something just to hold the box section bit that I put in bang on flush with this and bang on flush with this, I'll know that it doesn't really matter sort of where it sits on here. I'll know that if it's held there and it's held here, then I'm just welding it right across. So, and then fingers crossed, the runner should be exactly where it was. Okay, so the first section of the runner, or the track, is just stitched in a couple of places. So I've actually welded it from the back side because I want this track to be as smooth as possible. So I don't want to have to be grinding down any welds on this side. So I've been underneath the van welding it in from the back. And obviously with this bit here, I've welded it underneath as well, so that I can keep this bit as flush as possible, which it seems to be, so that obviously the roller can move more freely. So it's definitely starting to look a lot better now. I had it clamped up to the original track, so it's nice and flush there. But obviously I'm not going to weld anything at this end because I'll be completely making up this section here to then join onto my fresh bit of steel here. But for this piece, I've roughly marked my line as to where I'm going to cut. So I'm going to try cut it out in one piece as best I can, so that entire sort of flat section and that edge. And then obviously I'm going to have to do my best to make an exact copy on the bench with whatever metal I've got left. So here's my roller off of the door that was on here. The main roller hardly turns and there's a lot of play in it, but it'll give me a rough idea. So obviously it's going to go in and it's going to roll along there. You're hearing a scraping noise because that wheel's not actually turning at the bottom, so I need a new roller. Right, so I've cut this end bit out. And yeah, I'm really glad I'm replacing this actually. It's not in great shape, it's pretty pitted, especially this flat bit. It wouldn't be long before that's going right through, so definitely the right decision to replace it. So now I just need to make a template off of this. So I think for this flat section here, I'm going to use the same box section stuff, and for the roller as well, I'm going to use the same box section stuff. I'm just going to slit it so that I can make it curved in, and then I'll just sort of weld it back together. And then for this sort of middle portion, I'm going to see if I've got some relatively thick steel plate that'll weld in between. But obviously I'm going to have to put just a little bend in it. You can see that step there. That is 100% required. It's there for a reason. And it's so that bracket on the roller doesn't scrape along this piece here. So from underneath, you can see sort of the section that I'll be welding in there. And as I say, this piece here is not actually too bad. That'll clean up okay. Bits I'm going to have to replace, obviously this bit's absolutely rotten. So I think I will cut that out and replace with good steel. But all the steel that I'm going to be welding to for this piece is pretty good. It just needs cleaned on the inside. It's pretty good in here as well, up until about here. So I think when I run my sort of box section lip right along, I'm going to see sort of where it sits, but I'm hoping I might just be able to cut off that rotten bit at the bottom and then just sort of maybe fill the gap with weld. This piece here, I'm not too fussed about that because that's actually part of the repair panel for the outer lip that holds the seal on. So I've just kind of bent that out of the way for now while I see sort of what's going on. But anyway, as with the rest of the van, we just take it one piece at a time and slowly piece it together. But it's coming on, it definitely looks better just seeing good fresh metal in there. Right, so obviously trying to replicate this piece. So I'm doing it in 3 stages. 2 of them I've tacked in already. So the first one I've put in this bottom lip. And then that is, I'll show you in the back in a second, but it ties into the inside section of the B pillar, and then that bottom sill down there. So it's nice and strong. I've got some good strong welds in there. The next bit I've put in is the roller, just along there. So I've welded that, just like the last panel, just in a couple of places, just to hold it where it needs to be. Now the main thing I wanted to get out of that was to have it completely flush with the previous piece. So I think that'll be fine once I've ground that down a bit. And so I've done the same as what I've done for this one, and I took the finger sander and I just ran it right along the top roller there a few times, just to buzz back some of the spot welds that it drilled through, just so it's got a nice smooth surface for the roller to run along. Right, so I've figured at this point, before I go any further with this section in here, I want to make sure the door is actually going to work okay on the runner that I've built so far. So I've managed to get the door on. Now obviously I'm using the old runner that I was showing you earlier, so these wheels are totally worn down, so I'm expecting, you know, a bit of play in the door. Likewise, this wheel up here is worn down, and this end runner is also quite worn. You can see from the play that it's got there. So with that being said, I know that the door has got a bit of play up and down, but all I'm really looking for here is when I shut it, or at least slide it along here, is it A, going along this runner okay, turning this corner fine, and B, make sure the bracket is not touching this edge here. Particularly for this corner, I might have to just buzz some of these edges down a bit. So as you can see, it does shut. It does need a bit of a nudge to get it to shut, and I think that is to do with the up and down play, because the whole door has this amount of movement. So when I do have it shut, I actually have to, as you'll have seen in that last clip, I have to sort of lift the door as I'm pulling it away, or else it kind of just jams onto this latch. But I'll be honest, I'm not too worried about that just now. I think I put that down to worn out rollers. And obviously on this corner bit, there's no sort of top runner for it to follow into. And I need to buzz some of these welds down as well before I put in this final piece with the sort of stopper bracket as well. So that'll be the next bit to test. So you can see, again, it gets super close in there, but I'm hoping the new roller will fix that. Right, I've buzzed that down a bit narrower now, so let's see if the door will shut now. So far so good. And now as it gets towards the end there, it's got a lot more clearance. I might just buzz it a little bit more just to get a bit more clearance. So you'll see now it's got plenty of clearance in there. So I'm happy with that. Looks good. Right, I've fabricated up this corner filler piece. Just a flat piece of steel, and then I've bent a lip up to give me that step that I mentioned before. So what I'll do is I'll weld this in from the back. It's quite a nice tight fit into that inner rail there as well. So I'll do all the welding from the back, and then that means I won't have to grind anything down in here. So here's that piece from underneath. So there's just a wee gap up in here, but once I've got some welds in, I'll be able to just chop that up with a hammer. It's a slightly odd shape at the end here. That's what I'm trying to fill. So I don't mind if it overlaps just a wee bit. As long as it's nice and strong, that's the main thing. And obviously I'll be able to tie it in right along that channel. There's a bit of a gap there, but that sill is nice thick metal from that box section, so it should weld just fine. Tacked it in a few places. And I'm just testing the door just to check everything shuts okay. So this weld here, this tack, it seems to just be clipping on that, or it's maybe just missing it actually, but either way, any welds that I've got sort of in this area are going to get buzzed down anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and finish welding this up. Right, that's that corner piece fully welded in now. I'll show you it from the top first. So yeah, like I was saying, plenty of space for the runner. Bracket clears nicely, just need to buzz down these welds here nice and flush. Should be fine. It's welded in nice and tight to the sill all the way around. And like I mentioned earlier, I was welding all this from underneath, which is not the easiest, crawling under the van, but we got there in the end. It's all welded right round, nice and strong. So now I'll just need to finish welding right along these seams where I just kind of tacked it before as I was basically just testing the runner out. But now that I know that everything seems to go fine, I'll just finish welding that right up, and then everything should be real nice and strong and good to go. So as you just saw, I fully welded up that sort of top lip bit just in here. Happy with those welds. Nice and strong. I think what I'll do next is I'll start to buzz down some of these welds that I mentioned. This lip here on this sill piece could come down a bit as well, just so it meets flush in there. I'll clean back some of these little splattery bits that have came through, and then I'll start to buzz back these welds as well up in here too, start cleaning this up. Now the other thing I'm gonna have to try sort out, this is the kind of door stopper bracket thing. You can see it works off a spring mechanism, and this piece here where my thumb is supposed to go in and out. So when the door is fully shut, it almost latches it shut. The roller will get stuck in this little bit, and then with a bit of force, this would spring in and it would allow the door to move again. But mine's is totally seized solid. It doesn't move at all. Part of the floor and the screw is still in it as well. So I think what I'm going to do is just try source a second hand one of these from a breaker. Right, that's the runner ground down that sill bit as well, and I've just sort of tapered it down where these two bits meet, and then up in the back there I've just given everything a good scratch up with a Scotch-Brite. So I'm going to epoxy prime it right along up until where those two sill bits join. Bottom section's now epoxy primed. That's looking pretty good. So cleaned up this whole corner bit. I've just sprayed that with some epoxy. I needed to get these welds in here nice and flush because, as I mentioned before, this is a missing piece that I've had to cut out from in there. So I've just made another one just now. This is from some smaller box section, and that will sit something like that, and I'll probably just stitch it along these sections just here. So the idea is that piece will sit roughly there, and then this bracket that I mentioned before will sit something along those lines. Now obviously the other thing to consider is if the roller actually fits into it. So I'm going to try to show you that just now, because you can see there. It's a nice fit. So I'm going to go ahead and just give this bracket a coat of epoxy on the inside, and then I'm going to try weld it in so that it sits as flush as possible to these bits here. Okay, so that's that piece welded in at this end. Just tacked it there just now. I actually had it in too low to start with, so as I moved the runner along, the runner got stuck here because it was stuck height wise, so I chopped that out and then just brought it up a mil or two and then re-welded that. So yeah, it's just kind of tacked in place just now to make sure it was flush in underneath the channel. I actually bent this bit up a bit so that I could get in with a finger sander, and then I don't know if it's very clear, but I've managed to buff up in there so it's nice and smooth, so the runner moves nice and free. Okay, door's back on, and looks to be running nice and smooth. That's this end piece welded in now. Just a stitch along here and a stitch along here. And then I've ground back some of the welds. I've given it a scuff, ready for some epoxy primer. So I'll go do that just now, and then that'll be this corner bit complete. And I can start moving on to the next pieces in here and here. Okay, so the next bit I'm working on is tidying up this sort of box bit that's in the corner. So I've actually cut out this, which I'm guessing would have had a grommet in it from factory. But you can see it's rusted beyond that, so that'll only get worse. So I've essentially cut that out, and I've got this little plate here I'm going to weld in, and I've just drilled a little drainage hole. So I'm not going to run the grommet, I'm just going to sort of fill this stuff with cavity wax. So as long as I can get a straw up through there, I'll be able to fill this. So I'm not fussed about drilling to the same size hole as it was before. I'm going to call it a night here, and I'm going to come back to these in the morning before work. Alright guys, so the new rollers arrived. So I've fitted those. There's the bottom one. That's the top one there. And then that's the new one in the middle. So now that I've changed the runners over, the door now shuts a lot better. The gaps obviously will just need a bit of fettling to get them right, but I'd say they're not too bad for a sort of first attempt. Not bad at all. And also I don't need to sort of lift the door now as I open it. Just open it as normal. The new runners are all running nicely along the track as well. So yeah, I'm very chuffed with that actually. It's another small step in the progress of repairing this section. So now that I know that the track at the bottom is good, I can start to now confidently go and sort of build out these other sections and then look to get this section of floor back in, to which I can then build the step onto as well. Now the plan for the step itself, obviously this one's knackered, so I'm not going to be reusing that, but I've got a sheet of 2mm steel coming, so I'll be making my own one, but I'll be sure to film the process of that and stick it in. This section here is now completely boxed off, so I've absolutely filled it with epoxy primer, and then I've just welded this plate over the top. I've also cut out the 2 braces that I had tacked on the top section of these steps, and then I've re-welded them in sort of flush to this top runner piece here. And the reason I've done that is so that once I've built out this bit here, and then I've got my step panel sitting here, I can spot weld the step panel to these bars as well as to these sections, and then that'll just give me a real strong step. Just a quick view from underneath. I was chasing a bit of a gap on this one, so it's filled up with beefy weld, but nice and strong. This one was fine. Now I'm gonna have to sort out this end section now, but before I start on that section, I'm gonna clean up the rest of this chassis rail, and I'm gonna clean up this top section bit and in behind the runner, and I'm gonna give everything a good coat of epoxy primer just to protect it from any more surface rust. Right, so I've patched up this area just here, and the next bit I need to tackle is this corner. So what I've done is I've cut out this piece from here so that I can get better access to see what's going on in here. As you can see, it's rotting just here, and it's going a bit up in here, but it just joins basically to that step panel just in there. So I'm not really sure if all this bit is sort of necessary. So I think what I'm going to do is basically cut all of this off. So I'll cut along here, down here. I've already made a cut here, and so all I'll be left with is this sort of triangle piece. I'm then just going to build this up, and I'm not going to rebuild any of this stuff, because all it really is in there is just a sort of weird panel that surrounds the access up to this filler. So I don't think it's really necessary. So basically from here back, I'm just going to cut off and leave off, and I'll be able to repair this bottom section from in behind. And I'll just clean up all this stuff as best I can. Spray it all in epoxy primer, get it all protected, weld this bit back in, and then I'll be able to sort of build up the rest of my step. Right, quick update on this corner piece. So I'm starting to build it back out now. I chopped out all of the rusty bits just in there, and I think I've decided rather than rebuild all that complicated stuff, I'm simply just going to close it in here. So I'll make a piece that comes up in here, and then I've got the piece here that I cut out to gain access into there. So I can weld that back in and then sort of close in that bottom bit. And then I'll consider this corner sort of done and ready to build out the rest of the step piece in there. As for underneath, you can see that I've cut out most of this rotten bit in here. Obviously there's quite a lot of stuff up in here to clean up, right up into this channel, right up in here where the filler neck sort of passes through as well. Now I'm going to be boxing in, so you'll imagine this bit here will be plated in. So what I'm going to do with all this stuff is I'm going to leave this for now until I've got the tank out. Right, that's this corner all boxed in now. So I've welded that original bit that I cut out, just welded that straight back in. And then I've made this piece here, and it sort of tapers in at the bottom there, just to give the fuel tank a little bit more space, I guess, when I'm taking that out. Essentially all I need to do now, once I do take the tank out, is clean up all in the back of here, clean up all these wee bits, cut off any excess. So like there's an excess bit on this plate, cut that off. Obviously repair this section here. All these panels, I'll just clean them up as best I can and just coat them in some kind of protection. Okay, it feels like we're getting somewhere now. So obviously I've just boxed that section in and I got that coated in epoxy primer, and I've now went ahead and I've built out the rest of that floor section that I mentioned. I've just stitch welded it in across the top on the floor, and then I've just continuous weld along the edges there. And then I've also just sort of stitched it to the bottom lip here. So this is really nice and solid now. That's only like 1mm steel. So, you know, once you've got some folds and some welds and stuff, it really does strengthen the steel up. Now obviously I left this lip in so that when I put my step in, I've got sort of a bit of overlap there, just so it's a bit easier to sort of stitch it in. And I might just stitch it from the bottom as well, just for a bit of extra strength. But if I just grab the old step here, you'll get a rough idea of sort of how this is going to look. Now obviously I'm not using this step. I'm going to make my own one from some 2mm plate. But essentially it will sit somewhat similar to how it was before. And then obviously I'll just box in these sections. And sort of this bit here, obviously there's a fair bit missing from this step, but it'll come up to maybe somewhere like here, and I'll just box that in. So for now, I'm just going to buzz back where I've got continuous welds. I'm just going to leave the stitches because I'll probably seam seal over them. I'm going to buzz these down a bit more flush, buzz up in here and along the top there. And yeah, we'll get some epoxy primer on and then we'll be ready for the next step. That's it now in epoxy primer, just to protect it until I get to the next stage of the repair. Just a quick one to show the updates on the progress of the step panel. None of this is welded in yet. I'm still fabricating the panel. This is 2mm steel, so plenty strong enough. And this is sort of where I'm at just now. Still needs a bit of shaping and a bit of fettling just to get it to fit right. But now the other thing that I've literally just remembered right now is that you're going to need to account for this bracket as well. It looks like I've got the sort of width here, not bad, that the bracket can just sort of tuck in. I've maybe cut away just a bit too much on this tapered end, so I might just have to make up a little piece just to weld back on that sort of just covers that corner bit. It's either that or I could pull this bracket in a bit, just like that, which to be fair might be the easier option. The other thing to consider here is that your door actually shuts properly and doesn't catch on the step. So it looks like I'm all good for that. Now obviously there will be a rubber seal once I get that outer lip panel on that will close in that gap, but we just want to make sure that, you know, I've got about a finger's width there with the door roughly shut where it's going to be, so it should be good. So yeah, overall some good progress. As I say, just a bit more fettling, a little bit more sort of fine tuning just to get it exactly where I want it to be, and yeah, we'll start getting it welded in. Okay, so I think I've got my step panel roughly finished. So I've got the bracket fitted in there as well, the stopper bracket. Now what I noticed with that was, obviously it's designed to work with the profile of the old step. So you can see that spring bit is raised up slightly. So I've just packed in some shims, well basically just some washers, just to space that out so it still sits nice and even. And then obviously I've just drilled through the top. I'm just on the edge here, but it's fine, it all fits fine. And then obviously I've shaped the bottom lip right along. Tried to get that out nice and flat as I could. Had to cut a slit just in here, and then I've re-welded that just to try get that sort of curvature just in there. And then obviously it just tapers off to the end. I've also drilled where I'm going to spot weld it. So these holes that are further up, there's 8 of them. They correlate to these high spots on where the runner was before. And then these ones here, this one and this one, spot weld to the bars just here. And then the rest of it will just get stitched, stitch, 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 so on and so forth. And then at the ends here, I'll probably just sort of fully weld them along. So there we are with the panel roughly sitting in place where it needs to be. You can see the door bracket all sort of lines up nice. The door is sitting in there just now, so if I try to open that door, you'll see it skips the panel. So obviously once we're welded in there, I'll be able to fully test this out. But not a bad fit along the top edge. Just notched it just to get around those welds. It's quite nice and flush right along the edge. Likewise here. It sits a little bit high in here, but I think once I've got some welds in, I'll be able to sort of gently persuade that down. But before I weld any of this in, I'm gonna get the step off and get the airline and just blow out all the dust and stuff that's in the runner just now. And I'm gonna give that whole lot just another spray of epoxy primer, just to, especially deep into this bit here, just to make sure it's got a nice good coating. And then with the step itself, also I'm going to whip off the bracket, bare metal all this, scuff it up, and I'll epoxy prime all this as well, because once it's on there I can't access a lot of this again. So okay, so main tacks are in place, just one there, one in the middle, one at the top. I then shut the door at that point, everything seems fine. So I then proceeded to just fill that gap slightly, so just sort of tack that in. And I've went ahead and put all the spot welds in. And I've also just kind of got it at that edge there as well. So I'm just going to test the door one more time. So this bracket, the stopper bracket, should be working now. So, you know, I can feel that, you know, the door stops there unless I pull it enough to bypass that. It's shut and fine. It didn't sound as though it was scraping, but we'll have a closer look. It's got plenty of clearance. Plenty of clearance. Even for those bolts, we've got good clearance there. You see that? So I think we're in the clear to go ahead and do the rest of the welding. And just like that, we're fully welded in now. So I've closed up that gap in there and I've been able to weld right along there. There is a small gap in there, but that's okay, because when we box this corner in, we're not going to see that gap anymore. We will from underneath, but I'll probably seam seal it, or I might just leave it as a access point to spray some cavity wax stuff into there. But anyway, I've got stitches right along, some nice fat stitches in there. And then we're fully welded right along here, right up into that corner bit. And then obviously with the spot welds as well. So yeah, next steps now is to wire wheel back all of this just to clean it up. Buff back all these spot welds so they're nice and flush. And then we will start to build out these corner sections. Right, that's the step all sort of cleaned up, so all the spot welds flattened out. I'm going to run just little bits of weld into some of these bits just so I can smooth them out. And I've started to fabricate up the corner sections. So obviously these are not welded in yet. I'm going to totally coat this in epoxy primer, and then I've got that one there which I'll weld in, and then I've also made one for this side, and again I just need clean up in there and give it another spray of epoxy primer. And then this corner sits something like that. It pushes in a little bit more, but it should be good. It should be fine to weld. So I'll get both of these cleaned up on the inside. I'll get them epoxy primered on the inside, clean up those corners and spray them, and then we'll get these welded in. And then the only missing piece of the puzzle is the sort of seal rail bit that goes along the bottom. So we're getting pretty close now. Alright, got those fully welded in. I was going to just stitch the bottom, but I just decided to fully weld it instead. But nice and solid. And then this corner as well. Nice and solid. A little bit iffy there where it joins that sort of edge bit, but we'll buzz that down, no problem. And I've filled in all the little bits there, so we should be able to buzz that down nice and flush. But overall, it's looking good. Chuffed with it. So on to the last panel now, which is the outer sort of lip that the rubber seal fits onto. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a left-hand drive panel. You can get handmade right-hand ones, but they're quite expensive. So I'm willing to just modify a cheap left-hand drive one. So I've offered it up. I've trimmed it in a few places. And I think it's now fitting roughly where I want it to sit. So I'll show you where I've trimmed. So obviously I've trimmed this total end piece off. And then at this side, behind the door, I've got a bit more trimming to do, but I've trimmed most of that. So I'll just need to sort of trim down this lip here. Now obviously with it being a left-hand drive one, the sort of form on this part is way off. On here it's totally flat, but on this one it's got this sort of step. I'll be honest, I don't really care about that. I'm just going to be blobbing that in with weld anyway. So I might try and just build up the shape with weld, and then I'll try sort of grind it as best I can so that it sort of evenly blends in. But I'll be honest, I don't really care too much as long as the rubber seal runs nicely down it. It's the same at this side. It's way off, but I'm just going to trim it and try blend it in as best I can. Now what I have had to do at this end, just to match the profile of the kind of inner sill section that I made, is just cut a section out just to let this bottom lip naturally sit where it needs to be. I can then weld in the panel, and then I can fill this in with a strip of metal afterwards. In hindsight, I probably could have cut out less and just filled it with weld, but it's not a problem. Right, that's this lower lip welded in now. I did spot weld it right along, but they weren't too great, the spot welds. There was something going on with the welder a bit, but so basically what I've done was just welded right along the bottom. And what I'll do is when I trim this piece down, I'll cut right sort of through the welds, just right through the middle, and then when I sort of grind them all flush and flat, it should look pretty decent. And obviously I've filled in that gap in there with weld, and I'll just have to try and buff that down as neat as I can. And then it's the same in this corner a bit, so just filled in the gaps. It doesn't look pretty just now, but once it's all buffed back and a bit neater, it should be fine. Okay, so I've now ground down all the welds on this bottom rail as much as I could, and I'm pretty happy with that actually. I think it blends in quite nicely into these corner bits. You wouldn't really know that that was a left-hand drive panel going onto a right-hand drive van. I've ground down the bit that I patched in as much as I could. Obviously this bottom sill, just ground that down, that's still really nice and solid. And again at this side, actually quite a nice fit. You know, I've tapered the sill up so it meets nicely into this quarter. And I think once we get a bit of paint on that, I don't think you'll notice the difference really. So yeah, really chuffed with that. And what that does now mean is that all the welding and all the fabrication work is complete for the step, finally. It's been a hell of a journey, but we've got there in the end. but we're not finished just quite yet. Now we need to whip this bracket off, get the runner off, take the rest of this seal off, and there's a little bit of surface rust up here that I'm just going to clean up, and then I'm going to give all this a right good scuff up and a right good scratch up, particularly in here where I've had the spray grease and stuff. Just give that a good clean, and I'm just going to give everything a good spray in epoxy primer. And then once the epoxy primer is dried and it's cured in a little bit, we'll get the sliding door back on, we'll get the new seal on as well, and obviously the bracket tray and the runners and stuff, and at that point we'll consider it complete. Okay, that's everything cleaned back and had a couple of coats of epoxy primer. It's looking pretty good now that it's all in the same colour, and I've sprayed it in nice and thick on the insides there, so virtually everything that I could get access to has got a good coating, especially in these corners and stuff, so it should seal it up quite nice. Yeah, I'm going to let that cure off and we'll get the seal back on and the runner and stuff, and we'll fit the door, and then we should be done. Right, as you can see, van's back on the ground, door's back on, I've got the new seal on, and obviously the bracket and the runners and stuff are back on as well. It's all looking pretty good. And the door still shuts okay. Now obviously this needs a fair bit of fettling. There's quite a lot of adjustment in these doors. The top runner, the middle one, the bottom, and obviously the catch. They've all got some adjustment in them. So I think I will need to adjust this slightly. It's just sitting in a bit from the rest of the van, but I'm not too worried about that at this stage. The main thing is that the door opens and it closes and it runs along that runner, and nothing really catches or rubs or grinds or anything like that. And from the inside, we're nice and tight up to that seal in most places. There is, however, you can just see at the bottom there, you can see a bit of daylight, and there's a tiny little bit just in that corner as well. So all I think that really needs is just to pull this panel out a little bit in that sort of spot where it's there's a bit of daylight coming through. The other thing as well would be that runner is actually going along that seal there. Now it's not really going to do anything, it's not going to damage it as such, but I think if we were to just pull this lip panel out slightly, that would help prevent that. But like I say, the door has heaps of adjustment. There's a lot of fettling needing done here, and at the same time this is a 30-year-old van, so I'm not expecting this to be perfect. I really hope, if anything, that this video helps others that are potentially in the same situation, because these steps are pretty common in the T4s to go, as you'll have seen from the condition of mine. So I'm going to end this video here. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the video around, and be sure to stay tuned for the next one on the channel. Cheers.